Is it loud? Oh, I have a lot of. Yeah. The fan closest to me was on a very loud setting. Hello? Hello? Is this better? Can you still hear the music? Okay. Me. Let's see. I imagine it's probably gonna be a little bit quieter today, so we'll see how long I go for. Hey, Kickslap. Let me. Hello, Eric. Hey, Olin. I'm gonna be very surprised how many people actually show up to this, as we're not gonna be drawing anything. But, hi, Neil. Hi, Love Luna. Hey, Bam Curie. Hey, Chrissy. Hey, Grass. It's gonna be more people. If it's actually more people, that's actually kind of sick. That'd actually be really cool. Hey, Rathiel. Hey, Rotten Ringo. So yeah, just letting you guys know that we won't be doing any crazy, like, anything crazy. As if I do anything crazy on this stream. We're not going to be doing any like art today because I have to work on some NDA stuff still, and I hated the idea of like not streaming today, so we're gonna try something new, and we're just gonna do a just chatting thing. So you're gonna be looking at this screen for most of today, unfortunately, because I don't have like an avatar or anything like that. But it's gonna be pretty much like normal. Like, you can ask me questions and then I respond to you. We can talk about anything from casual topics to creative topics and stuff like that. So it'll honestly be pretty normal for you guys, except you just won't be watching me draw, which may or may not be boring, but seeing as I don't draw very fast anymore, for some reason, I've been pretty slow lately. Maybe it won't actually be all that different, so. Oh wow, stuff has been happening in chat. Excellent, thank you for the Prime Gaming for 20 months. Thank you, Luna. Neil, thank you for the tier 1 for 3 months. Solus, thank you for the tier 1 for 3 months as well. Should you open a Curious Cat? Should I open a Curious Cat? I-A-N-L? I-A-N-I? Thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Or L? L-A-N? I don't know how to say. What questions? Eric the Great, thank you for the Prime Gaming sub for 9 months. How's Peach? Peach is doing good. She has been really sneezy lately, and I think it has to do with allergies. I'm probably gonna have to do like a whole big cleanup of my room, so that she's allergic to a lot of things. And so I might have to do a whole cleanup just to, make sure we get all the dust out, maybe clean up her litter box again, just make sure everything's kind of dust and fur free, because she does shed a lot of fur. But yeah, she's been really sneezy, and you might hear her. She just sneezed. You might hear her. She's been sleeping a lot though, so I'm hoping that she won't get into a bit of a sneezing fit. She does have asthma, so it's kind of not super surprising for her to be sneezing a ton. It still distresses me to no end. Oh, Peach. When she sneezes like 7 times in a row. Peach. But yeah, she does have asthma, so it's not necessarily too crazy for her to be sneezing. It's still not fun to hear her sneeze, so I always worry about her. Peachy. So yeah, you might hear her in the background. Hydrate. I'll hydrate. Kind of happy because I was planning on drawing when I watch your streams. And when I watch your streams, I get conflicted because I was not on each one. Well, now you can draw and just listen to me, and it'll be all good, all okay. Cats can have asthma? Yeah, cats can have asthma. It's actually pretty... It's something I never knew, and I guess in a way I can't... I guess I'm... It makes sense. Like, why wouldn't they be able to as well? But yeah, cats having asthma it's kind of scary. I don't know if you've ever seen a cat have an asthma attack, but it's really like violent. They have like this deep wheeze that comes from their like chest, and it's real scary when you haven't come across a cat with asthma before. And especially for cats with like really bad asthma, it's like a lifelong thing that they kind of have to deal with. So you have to get like a nebulizer specifically for cats so you can use like human medication for them. And it's very, I don't know. It's just kind of scary. Luckily, Peach has not really had an instance where she's really had an asthma attack despite having asthma diagnosed for her. So currently we're kind of just working with the fact that like, oh, maybe she's still like okay for a little bit. She does sneeze a lot though, so yeah, we're trying to figure that out. Her sneezing doesn't necessarily mean anything bad though. That's the thing. What's my favorite condiment? Okay, so condiments are specifically like not like, what would you consider a condiment? Does like soy sauce and like ponzu sauce count as condiments, or are those like sauces and sauces don't count as condiments? Condiments are specifically like stuff like ketchup and things. Jelly Belly, thank you for the Twitch Prime Gaming for 18 months. So I really like these cute anime figures I see on Pinterest and how the anatomy is sculpted. I want to try a style like that. Any tips on how I can apply this? Feels like a weird question. So there are a lot of different ways that those sculpts can be made in a lot of different styles. So you're gonna kind of have to be a little bit specific about what you're trying to achieve with those. With anime styles in particular, there's a general consensus, I think, at least for me, that anime is kind of just the degrees of which, like, degrees of simplification from reality. Anime in particular is sort of the Eastern interpretation of that rule set, just as the West has its own cartoon version of that rule set. But the philosophical center of it is just how many degrees of simplification do you get into. And so depending on the style of the sculpt you're looking at, they might choose to completely omit muscle definition in most of the limbs because they're looking at something that they want to have a very like willowy, very slender kind of aesthetic to it. You might be looking at sculpts that are slightly more stylized and potentially a little bit more abstract than, you know, maybe a figure sculpted in the style of like 90s anime versus kind of more modern anime where you have pretty simplified, you know, big-eyed characters, more so than it was in like 80s and 90s. So, you know, there's a lot of different styles, a lot of different ways to apply that, so it really does depend on the sculpt that you're looking for. Ultimately, when you're thinking about applying styles, the way to break that down, for me at least, is to kind of start from the foundation, which is basic anatomical structure. Look at what they take away, look at what they don't put in, look at what they make a point to put in. Some artists are very particular about drawing like knuckles, nails, kneecaps on their characters. They're very particular about drawing actual nostril wings versus just dots on the face. Some people are very particular about drawing certain types of wrinkles in clothes, how the hair is stylized, the look of the eye. Do they actually close the eye and you see the tear ducts, or do they keep it open and don't even, you know, draw that in? Those are all stylistic choices that are, you know, decisions they made as a way to alter reality and how they represent reality. But at the core of it, all of those are meant to be evocative of or showcase some form of that very real thing. Even characters that seem to just have straight lines for legs, like, you know, Sailor Moon, Fruits Basket, like, they don't really have any muscle definition at all. But that's the artist making an executive choice that they don't want to have excessive silhouette breaks due to, you know, enhanced muscle definition in their characters. They have a specific look they're going for. It adds to that style. What is it that they choose to omit that allows them to have that look? So that's kind of what you should be looking at. If you're looking at trying to adapt a style, adapt into a very specific rule set for a style, look at what they have. Look at what they don't have. Look at what they choose to emphasize in all of their drawings. Compare multiple drawings by the same artist or the same sculptor, or multiple different sculpts with the same kind of style, and look at what they all collectively maintain. Those are the hallmarks of what creates a look, an aesthetic, a stylistic choice. So that's kind of what I'd recommend. If we're going back to the whole sauce or condiment argument, generally my favorite, like, okay, I'll just name two. My favorite sauce is ponzu sauce. I really like poke. I really like sushi. I really like Korean barbecue. Sometimes ponzu sauce is in all of them. Sometimes it's not. I like ponzu sauce quite a bit. If we're talking about like actual legitimate condiments, my partner turned me to this kind of like Japanese mayo, which is called Kewpie. I don't know if you guys have ever tried it, but Kewpie is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like better mayo. I guess it makes me feel less bad kind of mayo to eat. And so, yeah, it's pretty good. It really is pretty good. So I'd say that's my favorite condiment, even though I don't really eat a ton of stuff with mayo in it. If I do ever need to put mayo in something like a sandwich or whatever, I prefer to put Kewpie in. How have you been so far? Stressed? Yeah. Yeah. I have been pretty busy lately, and honestly kind of the reason why I wanted to try out something new this stream was because lately I've been kind of just sort of like in general been pretty burnt out, despite the fact that I'm still working and still doing, contracts and jobs and stuff. And, you know, I I wasn't sure if I was gonna have like the mental stamina to really stream. Turns out I still have to work. So if I'm gonna be working and I have the opportunity to kind of just talk and stuff, then I wanted to give this kind of format a try and see if it's something we could do in the future as well. Because if that's the case, then potentially I could stream more often, even if it's not really drawing, because drawing is pretty exhausting, especially after like a full week of work. But yeah, the past few weeks have been particularly busy. I've had to pull none too few all-nighters for stuff. And I'm only a few years removed from school, but it's already kind of tough to recover from an all-nighter at this point. I don't know, I feel like I shouldn't be having these problems until much later, but like I stay up and I feel like ill. I feel like sick. So then I have to like take a nap for like 2 hours. I've been taking naps like every single day. I feel like that's an indication of something. I have been taking like an hour or two naps every single day, potentially 3-hour naps every single day for like the past 2 weeks. Like it hits 2 o'clock and I'm like, if I don't I'll lay down on the floor, but my bed's like 2 inches behind me, so I should just go lay down on the bed. It's been very interesting, because I actively try to not nap, because I am notoriously terrible at waking up from naps. I have described it to people as the person who went down for the nap is not the same person that woke up from the nap. The person that woke up from the nap has only one goal, and the goal is to go back down into unconsciousness. So I wake up with the I go take the nap with the intention of getting up and being like, okay, I gotta get up right when my alarm hits. I gotta go back to work. I gotta power through. And then I wake up and my brain's just like, no thought. Return to darkness. And then I inevitably fall back asleep again and sleep for like another 4 hours. So, taking naps is dangerous for me, but I've kind of mastered waking up and having like some weird conversation with myself where I'm like, okay, I have to remind myself why I started sleeping in the first place. But, all this to say, yeah, I've been pretty tired recently. And I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I don't know when I'll get a break. I do have a couple days lined up where I'm going to take like a couple days away from work just to like take a nap and not feel guilty about it. That's coming up. So I will be taking some breaks soon. But, yeah. I'm curious about the stages of character design between thumbnail, iteration, and final design. I feel like there's so many avenues to explore and I get lost. Any tips? So I cover this in my Class 101 course, but essentially there are a lot of ways to do character design because there's the philosophy that character design is very like straightforward. So those types of people will tend to teach you a very specific method for character design that might be going from, ideation to thumbnailing and iteration to, or rather moving on to iteration and then kind of going from iteration and doing a process of elimination down to like from 50 silhouettes to 15 sketches to 5 iterations to maybe 5 to 10 color iterations to 1 final version. People have a lot of different ways to do that, what methods they use, whether or not that's silhouetting, just straight up sketching, whether or not that's color blocking. different ways, right? Or, you know, people that don't stick to a solid method. They hop around to anything. People who just start straight up sketching characters in various poses, ways, taking notes. Some people write a lot right before they design a character. Some people will, you know, do really, really tiny thumbnails. And like also write notes next to it, and they'll just take those thumbnails and blow them up to be bigger, and they make that choice. They jump from thumbnails to you know, larger iteration sketches. I think ultimately, you know, if it helps you to have a solid process going from, in my opinion, ideation, and that's like notes. So you write out, you know, a mind map of your character, all the things that you think make up this character: personality, job, archetype, setting, maybe bits of backstory, like are they a street rat, are they an affluent you know, student of lore, are they, you know, whatever. Take those core elements of a character, write them out, figure out all these different moving parts about them, things that you can use to then design that character. Then going to research, building mood boards for a character, building out, you know, okay, so do I need technical knowledge to know how to draw these things, like clothes, specific styles? Is this historically accurate? Is this more fantasy? Then once you have all of those pieces, disparate pieces, all these different ideas, start putting everything as much as you can down on paper in the form of iteration. So this could be actual sketches, this could be silhouettes, these could be thumbnails. Whatever helps you regurgitate all the ideas that you currently have in your head. Then start, you know, eliminating the ones that you're like, okay, not this one, not that one. Once you've kind of put down everything you have. Generally, in this stage, a lot of people have a difference in philosophy about whether or not quantity over quality is the key here. Definitely, I think a lot of us have a tendency to over-edit, correct our thinking. We tend to not put ideas down if we think they're half-baked. But sometimes it's the ideas that you don't necessarily think are the best that end up surviving because they have that little bit, that little nugget of gold that you can work with, as opposed to ideas that you've kind of pruned and cut into shape and trimmed a little bit because you're like, oh, well, this couldn't work and that couldn't work, and it comes out feeling very mediocre, very middle ground. So putting all of your ideas on paper in that iteration phase, then doing a process of elimination, cutting out the ones that don't have interesting silhouettes, pointing out ones that have interesting ideas but not interesting execution, so then you try and do those again. Whittling that list potentially from 100 sketches, 50 sketches to 15, 20. And then continuing to cut that down until you reach the few that have solid ideas, interesting silhouettes. And then you start working out the nitty-gritty details, like, okay, so what does this character actually look like? What aspects of their life story, their backstory, their job, their personality help define why they dress the way they do, or why they pose, or how they act, or, you know, all these different little bits and pieces of their costume that you didn't get to really explore in the silhouette phase. Now you have to come up with reasons. Why would this character wear a big coat with a staff? It can't just be because you thought that silhouette was cool. Now you have to figure out a reason why this character is going to have all these things, which is where a lot of people get trapped because they usually pick the silhouettes that just look interesting, or are, you know, the kind of meme concept art silhouette things where you have character with big coat, tiny legs, and big staff or big weapon or something. It's this part that you're isolating the core of your character, figuring out what are the working pieces for them. Going into color variations, going into, you know, kind of this sort of exploration of detail and figuring out, you know, material reads, what texture and fabrics or lack of fabrics does everything have? Does this character have details on them that is very indicative of world building, things that you have to reference back to, or potentially explain some other way? You don't have to figure out everything. Some things can just be a stylistic choice for sure, but depending on how serious you want to take the character design, it could be a practice in trying to explain everything, making everything a very logical choice, or just kind of sticking to whatever looks cool. And those are two different paths to take, until you ultimately end up with the one design that has all the things that you've listed out as being integral to communicating about this character. You have everything on them that, they look like a real person who would choose to wear these things, who would carry these things on them. These are important markers of who they are, whether or not that be their job, their personality, their sense of style or taste, how they like to express themselves visually, core attributes of who they are represented in what they're wearing, what they look like, how they dress, how they stand, how they pose, and putting them in a way that other people can also get semblances of that same message. Maybe not necessarily knowing the whole story. They don't need to know that 15 years ago this character had something tragic happen to them, but they can tell that this character's seen some shit, right? Then that's kind of all you need. You want to make a character that is interesting and mysterious enough that people kind of want to know more about them, and that's what makes character design interesting. So when it comes to stages in between character design, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but ultimately you always want to end somewhere around there. What you choose to fill up that space in between is ultimately up to you. And I do recommend, looking at how other people have come up with ways to fill that in between. How are other people's processes for character designing? What are people's specific techniques for getting ideas out there or generating ideas even? There's an infinite amount of ways that you could do this, slight variations on other people's techniques or not. I tend to not follow one specific process. I do teach a process because I think it's helpful to have steps until you're ready to kind of use those tools out of order or in a new way. But, there are plenty of people who have made content about designing a character, how to make a character interesting, how to add storytelling to a character, both free and paid content that you could definitely get into, everyone with their own perspective on it. So I would recommend doing some more research in that area if it's something you're interested in. Hi, Minty. Question about getting into art at an older age. Is it feasible to chase art as a career if I'm 30? Yes. All people care about, and all people should care about in this space, right, in art, is if you can do the job. If you can do the job, there's no reason for them to really give a shit about how old you are. Hi, Mr. Bowtie. I mean, it's the same concept of like show don't tell. We're working in a very visual field, so why would you spend a lot of time trying to, describe to someone something that you could easily show them? And this is something that a lot of students struggle with, from my experience, is that when they make a character, they're so attached to the version of the character that only they know, that it prevents them from designing a character that everyone else can also understand. When you're so convinced that this character has such a deep lore and deep story because of all these world-building elements that you put into them, or thoughts you have in your head that you don't necessarily communicate with other people, when you go to then try to communicate a character or a story or a character arc to someone else, it's hard for them to know how to completely understand something, because suddenly they need like X, Y, and Z information ahead of time to kind of understand the context. I remember being in class and that kind of being a part of someone's character pitch. They didn't know how to pitch a character because to them, this has been an OC that they've had for so long. They know the context of the story. They know why this character is cool. But when you actually looked at the character, it was like, none of that actually showed up because ultimately this design didn't say anything special about them or didn't communicate anything special about them. And ultimately it led to the character looking pretty generic or pretty nondescript. There was no way for other people outside of that person's head to understand that, oh, this character has, you know, a certain personality type, that he was frugal or super utilitarian, you know, is the type to wear out a piece of clothing for the rest of his life. But he was wearing, like, super decorative tech wear, and it was like, okay, is that just the context of your world, or is that a character choice? Like, tech wear is not cheap. It's a pretty expensive fashion choice. So is everything in this world tech wear based? You know, it's like elements like that where there's a dissonance between what the person's communicating visually and what the person's saying. Ideally, you don't need to let a person know everything about what your character is or who they are, what they do. You need to give them just enough information for them to want to know more. And that's really the ticket in. Honestly, I've been wanting to character design more. I feel like I need certain skills I don't have or don't have the confidence in those skills to even try. Ultimately, I feel like there's kind of a tendency in a lot of artists, and I know because I do this too, where we don't really necessarily feel ready anytime to kind of go and start doing the stuff that we actually want to do. We're like, oh, well, I don't know how to, you know, like, I don't know how to necessarily tell a story through a character's prop, because I don't know, maybe not, I don't know how to render X thing or whatever, or the idea of designing is so kind of intense and daunting that even the thought of it sort of paralyzes you. And it's like a pretty consistent part of, I think, the experience of learning a new skill, especially something as kind of generic and open-ended as design. Ultimately, though, you kind of just have to understand that waiting for permission to start doing something you're interested in is never going to, it's never going to actually happen. No one's going to actually, like, tell you, hey, now's the time to start doing that character design project you've always wanted to do. Because by the time they are doing that, it's usually because you're having to do it for something, or you needed to show that you are interested in it. And, you know, I relate to this in the way that I've always been interested in character design, but I didn't have any character designs in my portfolio up until 2020. Like, I'd been drawing for a really long time, and I'd always kind of known that I liked character design, but I didn't have a single character design project until, like, spring of 2020. I had an illustrator's portfolio because I did freelance illustration, but I always knew, like, oh, well, character design is actually the thing that I want to do. But I didn't have any pieces for it, because I was like, oh, well, I kind of don't know if I'm totally ready to go and do that character design project, or, like, I feel like maybe I need to refine my process a little bit more, but I didn't actually do any character design projects. So how was I ever going to actually get work doing character design, or actually practice my skills doing it, if I never tried doing it on my own time? And it was kind of that realization that I didn't have anything to show these people to prove to them that I actually did do this thing I wanted to get hired for, that I kind of just sort of sat down and finished 2 pieces that I think some of you guys might recognize. I finished 2 pieces where I was like, okay, this is going to be sort of the 2 pieces that I make to really emphasize that, hey, I do enjoy character design. I am interested in it. Here's me showing off that I know how to move a character around, show their personality, show their expressions. And one of them was for my Arabian Nights character, Amira, and the other one was for my sci-fi skater girl, Horangi. And those 2 pieces alone got me most of the character design jobs I've gotten since in the last 2 years. It's from people being able to see that on my profile, essentially. The only 2 pieces that I really had to show that, like, hey, I do like it, here's some stuff that I've done for it, please hire me to do more stuff like this. It was one of the few things I actually had, and as soon as I had those things up, instantly a lot of people started calling me a designer, a character designer, as opposed to an illustrator. Because I never really honestly liked illustration nearly as much as I did just kind of drawing and sketching and doing designs. I don't necessarily consider myself too much of a designer either. I think I'm kind of a weird sort of non-committal in between. But ultimately, though, it was the idea that I kind of had to just bite the bullet, take the plunge. Even if I wasn't confident in the work I was making, I knew I could make it again. I could try again. I could redo all this stuff. No one has to see or know or even hear about, all these weird versions of design projects that I tried doing that failed miserably. And whenever I'm ready to show people that, like, hey, I know how to do this stuff and I'm really interested in it, I can make that decision on my own time. I think that being able to say that, to try it, to make it work, has kind of really cemented to me that, the hardest part for anything is usually just to get started. But at no point is anyone going to give me permission to start, much less me. There's no point in which I, as an artist, will ever give myself permission to do something, because I will never be good enough to do it in my own head. So I kind of just have to assume that if I want to do something, if there's a project that I want to try, a thing that I get really excited about that I want to do, it is kind of pointless to just say, I'll do that someday when I'm more confident or when I'm more skilled. All of the current ideas I have about stuff I want to do in the future are all because I've tried doing them in the past and failed miserably. And there are terrible iterations of graphic novels that I've tried doing, stories I've tried writing, animations. I used to try and do animations because I really wanted to, I don't know, I kind of got into it. I watched too many animes, and so I was like, oh, I'll do animation maybe. Terribly complicated skill set that I really don't have. But there exists out there an MP4 file of me attempting to animate stuff. And I did it knowing that I wasn't prepared to do that stuff. But the fact that I tried it, the fact that I know I want to learn to do that someday, means that I'm not going to be afraid the next time I give it a shot, I'm not going to be worried that I don't have the right skill sets. I know I don't. But the fact that I did it means I now know what skill sets I am missing. So that in the spare time that I'm not doing those things, that I'm not engaging in those hobbies or those other projects that I want to be doing, I can be studying other stuff. Every time I see an animated movie, or I'm, on Twitter and someone reposts like a sakuga of an anime that I think is really cool, I'm watching it and I'm looking at it trying to figure out, like, okay, so what part of this am I missing? What skill set should I learn and really research, and what are they doing from frame to frame that makes this movement so fluid and so interesting? And that changes how I interact with different types of media, because now I have a new motivation to learn a skill for something that inevitably I will try to do again at some point in the future. All this to say that ultimately there will never be a time where you feel like you have all the skills necessary to try a project. You'll always be too afraid and feel too unprepared to really just give something a shot. But it's not until you've tried it that you can really say for sure that you know what your limitations are and you know what your skill sets are, that you know what you're missing. Because you really won't, especially if you don't actively try to make projects of that type. So if you're interested in character design, if you're interested in working in this kind of pipeline, trying out a specific technique, doing a process, you're not going to know if that process works, if that's how you should go about it, if that's something that you should work towards, if you've never given it a shot yourself. How to not transform his passion into a nightmare. So something I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about is our boundaries when it comes to passion and work. Especially when you make something you're passionate about into something a little bit more real. You're not just excited about it, you're doing it actively. That changes the stakes at which you critique your own work. It changes the stakes at which you view your people around you, the work that you see online. You start judging them differently because you're looking at them differently. It's no longer something you just do for fun. Now it's something that actually has inherent value if you do it well. So that there's that. There's not being able to, or not really having the right, I guess, mental blocks to kind of prevent yourself from attributing too much value or too much, pressure based on, other people in that community, based on preconceived notions of what it means to be good at this thing, whether or not you belong in that sphere. All of those things suddenly start warping your ability to have fun with something. And I didn't learn this until relatively recently, because I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking that I could have boundaries in my life with my art when I don't really have boundaries in general. But something I learned is that boundaries are actually kind of sick. They're actually pretty cool, because what you kind of learn by realizing what you value, what you want to maintain, what you want to uphold, whether or not that be your satisfaction, your personal enjoyment of something, whether or not that be having something be strictly business, having a hobby be something that you can do without putting too much of yourself into it. All that stuff requires like an active understanding between you and the art. When it came to like stuff like social media, it was a new boundary I had to learn, because I didn't understand that by me putting so much value in other people's work online, I was constantly kind of shifting the goal for what I thought was good or acceptable or even enough. What would count for my art to be good enough to me. I kept moving that goalpost because I'd see something better. Always see something better. I'd always see a better artist, a younger artist, someone who was far more talented, far more versatile, someone who had a different skill set, was in an even completely different field than mine, and yet I'd attribute their specific perceived success as being something I have to work towards, and it warped my ability to see my art as my own journey. Suddenly it became like an obsession to always be looking at, like, oh, what are other people doing? And oh, this seems like a popular style. I wonder if I should do that too. Or like, it seems like people are really into drawing hot anime girls. Maybe I should learn how to draw hot anime girls. Oh wow, I really hate how I draw faces. I feel like I can't draw faces pretty enough. And just snowballs, right? Art is my job and is also my hobby. If you're going to take something like that into a professional space, you have to understand what is just for you to enjoy and what is something that you're going to commodify for that profession. Knowing when you can turn off your brain and just be like, this is not a project that is going to creatively fulfill me. So, I need a plan for things that I want to do on my own time that are actually cool to me, that I actually enjoy doing, and remind me of reasons why I'm doing this in the first place. Whether that be returning to your roots and, maybe you're a diehard fine artist in your day job, but you're a big anime fan in your weekends. Or, you spend your work life doing illustrations for magazines or something like that. But, on the weekends you're learning how to make your own short film. Like, stuff like that where you can draw the line between what part of your life you spend doing stuff you explicitly want to do, and what part of your life are you spending where your hobby and the skill sets you learned due to your hobby are being utilized in that professional space, and separating those things. Boundaries in my mind have been one of the best things I've ever learned for my sake. Knowing that I actually do need space away from other people's opinions. I need space away from kind of other artists in general, because I kind of value being able to focus on my own stuff, and not having all that noise around me is so much more beneficial. That was something I had to learn to do in order to maintain my love and my interest and my passion for art. That doesn't mean I'm always happy all the time. I think the past couple months have kind of been an indication of, like, this can still fail. I can still burn out and be extremely exhausted by the idea of drawing, by the concept of working and drawing and then going home and drawing again. But I also think that the fact that I didn't have this in place a couple years ago nearly led to me, making one of the worst decisions of my life. So when it comes to transitioning out of a hobbyist, knowing what makes you happy and keeping those for yourself, incredibly important, because work can only do so much when it comes to adding to your happiness. You have to kind of be the person that facilitates an active creative fulfillment with the work that you do, because jobs are not going to do that for you. Yeah, I was just an illustrator before. So do you think all you need is one or two good pieces in your portfolio to start your professional life when you're steering the camp at Havington? in general, your portfolio should probably have more than just like one or two pieces, but essentially, sometimes it only takes one or two really good pieces to make an impression on someone. This is kind of why I advocate for someone having a website, a professional one, disconnected from social media, so not a Twitter or Instagram, but like a professional website. And you can use ArtStation for this because they have a website version. But being able to put in kind of a collection, a group of pieces that, you know, you think are really relevant to what they're looking for, are in the right vein stylistically, potentially thematically, and then having a bunch of other stuff on other tabs on your website. If people are really interested in the work that you have in your portfolio, they're gonna look at other stuff on your website. And especially if on the front page you have, oh, here's the project that you're looking for that is clearly very geared towards your thing that you're hiring me for. But then, hey, look, there's some other really good-looking pieces of other skill sets that I have. And it only really takes one or two good things of those types of things to really get someone interested. For my job, I sent them like a kind of category in my website that I'm like, hey, here's the things that you probably want to look at. Like, they're character design related stuff. They are, they've got, you know, iterations and thumbnails, and it's very character design oriented. But then I had a couple of other projects, one of which had like storyboards in it, because I was doing like a cinematic story beat for a completely different project. But it was enough to catch the eye of one of kind of the primary people that were looking at my application, and so it gave me a leg up because they saw something they really liked that wasn't necessarily a part of the portfolio, but it was one piece that they felt like was really interesting to them. And that could be anything. It could be just a piece they see from you on Instagram. It could be something you have in your portfolio that they find is really charming and really suitable, exactly what they're looking for. Or it could be just something that they find. Either way, you know, I think if there are portfolio requirements, stick with those. But in a lot of cases, it usually doesn't take a whole portfolio of 15 pieces for someone to say, like, yes, absolutely, this is who I want. It takes, like, that one page, whether or not that's a full render or whether or not it's just a page of sketches where they're like, I like how this person thinks. I like their philosophy. I like their creative vision. So that's kind of why, you know, people recommend that don't just fill your portfolio with a bunch of content. Really curate it so that not only are you constantly updating it with new work, you're also always replacing the okay stuff with the really good stuff. Because even if you do have a portfolio with a ton of things, when they're flipping through it, it's really only going to take one of those images to convince them, or not convince them. I'm glad you find the advice helpful, Ruby. What are we chatting about today? We're just chatting about anything. Teal, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 21 months. Hey, little sky. Oh, it is very warm in my room. This is very unfortunate. Oh. Sometimes when I go to meetings, sometimes I'm wearing like a tank top or something because it's super hot, but then I'm always like, oh no, this is not, you know, I mean, game dev studios in particular are super casual. Like, these people wear t-shirts and and like jeans to work. They're not wearing anything special, but I was also like, oh, maybe I shouldn't like show shoulders or something. So then I put on a jacket, but then like I'm 15 minutes deep into a Zoom call and I'm about to just die of heat stroke in my room, but I'm having to like pretend that that's not happening because I don't want to like leave because the conversation is really important, and I also don't want to like come back and have like a totally different shirt on or anything. So I'm just like sweating, sitting in my chair, like hoping that the meeting ends at a time where before I like pass out. It's usually not that serious, but it's been very warm recently. Do you have any advice on do's and don'ts for folks sending out their portfolios on their first art jobs? I'm not really the person to ask about that, just because my experiences with portfolios has been very loose. A lot of people contact me personally, because I'm really used to freelance jobs. I don't do a lot of sending my portfolio out to applications, and I'm usually working on longer term stuff, so I'm not always looking for more work. But in terms of just in general portfolio do's and don'ts, like if you're making a portfolio for a very specific job type, like, hey, I want to be a storyboard revisionist for animation, or I want to be a character concept artist, then don't put in a bunch of other stuff in your specific portfolio. This is kind of why, again, a website's really nice, because sometimes they'll ask for the website link on top of your portfolio stuff, so that if they are interested, they'll go look and see what other stuff you have on your website after they've looked at your resume and portfolio. Classic things like don't overload your portfolio with a ton of text. Pick the pieces that you've put into it, that you maybe made for it, to be very specific to that job. If they're fantasy oriented, put fantasy stuff in there. Like, don't show them other things outside of like what they're specifically looking for, and then put all that extra stuff, that other genre stuff, into your website. Constantly be updating your portfolio with like new relevant work, so it's not like a stylistic mismatch with your current skill set. Keep your pages concise, like don't clutter them with stuff, evenly space things out. There's like a balance between too much and too little. That's kind of more on a personal level, but just kind of trying to look at it as a kind of how can you make this the least uncomfortable for people to look at, essentially, when it comes to spacing and content organization and text and info. Generally, people aren't really looking at a portfolio to read anything, so if you're thinking about putting in long blurbs about your character's backstory and stuff, don't. They're probably not going to read it. They really don't care about your world building, in terms of like what you can write. They're interested in what you can put into the actual design, if that's something you're working on. But yeah, there's probably other stuff as well, but I would recommend going to like any free portfolio review type places, because I tend to not usually, like, when I'm given portfolios to review, I'm usually kind of looking more at the specifics of a project. That's not necessarily what a trained portfolio like recruiter or kind of reviewer is going to do. I have a very like casual approach to it, so there's probably better people to ask. And in fact, if you are a part of the Resolution Art Discord or have yet to join, I would recommend going to them, because they do portfolio reviews once in a while, and those people are extremely knowledgeable about do's and don'ts about portfolios, what are kind of the hallmarks of like a good and professional presentation, especially for places and studios, particularly in animation and film. And they have a lot more experience coaching people on that. I'd say look up Resolution Art Studio. They have a website where they have their Discord listed, I believe. Their public Discord listed. And you can get in on it and join, and they have stuff on there where you can get notified if there are any job offers related to your field. And you can go and apply. They share tips, tricks, they do portfolio reviews, potentially events. I don't really know what they have planned for the rest of this year, but from my experience, the people that run it, Dylan and Chelsea and a bunch of other people, very knowledgeable in this kind of stuff, and a lot more, I think, concrete in their help versus me. That's just kind of like, put stuff you want to draw in your portfolio. It's like, they'll give you much better help than I can. Oh yeah, we have been having to block links, unfortunately, because of the recent hate rating. But just search up Resolution Art Discord, or Resolution Art Studio specifically, because there is something else called Resolution Art, I think. But Resolution Art Studio, they have a website, and it's run by Dylan Hatchet and Chelsea. I don't know how to say her last name. Chelsea. I'm not gonna try. But those two lovely people will definitely be able to help you. Keith, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 3 months. Or 11 months, rather. 3-month streak. I'll have to work on my website more to divide the concept from illustration, maybe for fun. Alright. Yeah, I'd say taking some time to really, look at how your website kind of conveys, the work that you do and how to make it clean and easily, navigatable, I guess, is really good practice. The less clicks someone has to get to a type of project or a specific style, the better. Of course. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Oof. Why is the chat so high? Hold on. I need to come up with an actual proper format for this. I did try to quickly come up with something before the stream started, and then it was gonna end up taking so much longer to finish than I had, because I only had an hour between work and the stream starting, so I'm gonna have to just do that some other time. But hopefully next time I ever do something like this, we'll actually have a proper setup overlay thing going on. I somehow landed a professional job and I'm now crippled by imposter syndrome, and I don't trust that anything I draw is good anymore. How do you know how to move past this? So congratulations. Imposter syndrome is particularly difficult to get over because you don't really know where it's stemming from beyond kind of a very base fear of inadequacy and inconveniencing people or potentially not performing to standard or being a disappointment. There's a lot of like core fears that go into imposter syndrome. And ultimately, nothing I will say and nothing anyone else will say will really change your mind or change the fact that you don't feel like you deserve to be in that space. The only thing I can say is that in instances where you're feeling particularly unsure about whether or not you deserve to be in that space, the best I can do is say that yes, you do. You absolutely do. Every single time. And if you're in a space where you feel, if you're in a state, I guess, where you feel kind of like you can't trust other people's assertions on that, in a way, I guess it's kind of like fake it till you make it. You kind of just have to believe in the idea that, you know, regardless of how you're feeling, you still have to keep doing stuff. You still have to keep moving forward. And you're just going to have to find a way to sort of mitigate the fact that you have this voice in the back of your head always telling you that there's no way you are, you know, fit to be here. I remember my teacher telling me a story about some guy she met at a convention, and she was talking with him, and he's like, yeah, I go into work every single day and I'm convinced that that is it. That is the last day I'll ever work ever again, because they're finally going to find out that I'm a total fraud, that I have no idea what I'm doing, and that they'll finally kick me out for good. And that was Glenn Keane. Glenn Keane said that to an art student years ago, talking about how he never felt like he was ever actually good enough for his job. How he always felt like they're finally going to find out that he doesn't actually know what he's doing, ever. Glenn Keane. Potentially the man that has kind of crafted a lot of our childhoods. And I think the fact that he was willing to admit that to someone, I think, is really, really nice. It's very honest. And I think all of us would be much better for all of us to kind of be able to say that with confidence, that all of us, to a certain extent, feel the same way. We all feel generally like we found ourselves in situations that we don't necessarily belong in, that we are amongst people and peers that far outperform us or generally deserve positions that we don't, and yet here we are in the same space with them, and it's such a big cognitive dissonance in your head. And again, ultimately, nothing I say will ever really convince you. The only thing that I can say is that you're just gonna have to believe it and fake it until you do believe it. Fake the idea that regardless of how you feel, clearly you're here. Clearly someone else thought you were perfectly capable. Clearly someone else deemed your capabilities and your skill set and your expertise as being perfectly viable for the position that you're in. And they wanted you enough to hire you for that position when they could have hired anyone else. So now you just have to do what you do best. You have to not necessarily be someone different than yourself because they hired you for you. Now you just have to do what you know how to do, what you are able to do, how you're able to solve these things, how you're able to, accomplish your assignments and figure out solutions and work with other people. Basic skills that you have that even if you don't feel confident in, someone felt confident enough in your capabilities to hire you for that position. And at a certain point, once you've kind of lived with that sort of, I guess, thought process long enough, imposter syndrome kind of just becomes something you live with as opposed to something that is haunting you. At some point, you realize that, yeah, I don't necessarily feel like I am, the right for this job, but at the same time, I know that I know how to do certain things. I know that I have a certain skill set. I've proven to many times before that I can, perform certain tasks and be a certain expert in something that, I no longer necessarily feel like I don't belong. Perhaps I always feel like I could be better than this. But at some point, the syndrome itself does kind of start to fade in intensity. Sometimes it comes back with full force. Sometimes you kind of just faintly notice that it's there. Little tiny pieces of doubt in the ways that you present yourself and how you present your ideas. But ultimately, for me, I think faking it until you make it is such a valid way to live. It's the way that I've kind of conquered my social anxiety to a certain extent, that I can actually interact with people on a daily basis, even though it does fail me sometimes. It's the only way that I've been able to, present my ideas, act like an authority in my field when I know I'm not. Because at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I've done this job, no one's kicked me out yet. People seem to be okay with me and what I can do. So that's gotta mean that I'm better than I think I am. And I'm gonna run with that. What's my favorite character design? God. Okay, so I get asked this a lot, and I feel like I can never come up with solid, answers. But, I really like the character designs from Guilty Gear. I think Soul Bad Guy has one of my favorite kind of exaggerated silhouette designs I've really ever seen. So I look at Guilty Gear quite often. Specifically, Xrd and Strive more often now. I've been really into Jet Set Radio recently, specifically Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, because I think Team Reptile does some pretty cool stuff. And their other game, what was it? What was their other game? The one where he kicked a soccer ball around. Lethal League. Yeah. Lethal League. I think Lethal League has some of the most charming designs. I love Latch. He's a little alligator. He's very, very cute. I thought his design was great. And I've been looking at a lot of those kinds of designs whenever I find myself trying to do something very stylistic. Who else? Characters from Journey. I think Journey has such a good character design, especially if you ever manage to see what is in the Journey art book. There are some great designs in there as well, even if the final character ended up being really simple. What else? Do I like anyone else's design? I don't know. I think I usually like how they're drawn more than I like their design. And I think the execution of a character often influences me more than just like the core design principles, which is why I tend to not think of myself as a true designer. I appreciate design and I can design characters, but I don't have that like perfect designer mind where I'm always thinking about you know, shapes and silhouettes and stuff. I like drawing a little too much to really spend most of my time thinking about that. But I'll see if I can come up with a better list. I know people ask me that quite a bit. Hey, belts, perfectly valid character design technique, I guess. Currently struggling with drawing symmetrically. I flip my canvas a lot but can't seem to line things properly. Is there a way to drain my eye to get better at this? Okay. The belts in 14... The belts on that one costume in 14 is egregious. Good Noodle, I suck at symmetry as well. And I've been trying to fix it my whole life. I have never been able to fix it. All I've been able to do is use guidelines. When I know something has to be parallel, I try to draw lines straight across to make sure that everything lines up, or even using rulers in Photoshop. And doing it that way. Because there's no way I'll ever be able to draw something symmetrically the first time around. I literally can't do it. It's like impossible for me. So I feel you. I don't know how to solve it. I wish I did. What do I think about Bayonetta's new design? It's the one with the... She has pigtails? I haven't actually looked at her. Bayonetta finds herself in, like, kind of a weird place for me, where she is, on principle, an extremely noisy character. But in a way, I forgive it because she's so bombastic and unapologetically who she is that I can't fault her for dressing the way she does. You know? You look at her and you're just like, I know that's Bayonetta because she's like 10 feet tall and she's got black hair and glasses. Like, I know that's Bayonetta, of course. And she's got the pistol, what is it? Shoes? High heels? Whatever they're called. That's Bayonetta. She's made a name for herself. She is who she is. And, like, she's got cool core ideas, like guns for heels. An awesome concept. Love that. If we're actually gonna break her down design-wise, extremely greebly. All of her designs are on such a small level that on any other character I would be pretty, like, about. But she's Bayonetta. How are you gonna be mad at Bayonetta? Bayonetta's perfect in every way, because Bayonetta is 100% honest with who she is, what she's trying to convey. It's got the level of flamboyance and kind of, like, extreme quirkiness that goes with the brand. So, she's got a great design, but that's because she's Bayonetta. If you're gonna ask me, just candidly though, if I thought her design was great, I don't think this version of her is very iconic. I think her original is a lot more iconic than this one, because the original had bigger silhouette creating shapes, like her sleeves being parts of her hair. The fact that she was kind of just woman-shaped, if we're honest, for most of it is like whatever, but she got the big shoes, you know? And then occasionally, I don't really know much about Bayonetta, but occasionally she has her like super tall hair. That's a great look. It's a great kind of hook, visual hook to her head. And she's got kind of like that tall ponytail thing going on. Fantastic. Love it. Then she cuts her hair and her hair's short. Looks great. Awesome. The new one, it's okay. She's woman-shaped. Again, she's got braids. That's cool. We all know she's Bayonetta, so it's fine. But to me, not as interesting. She looks gorgeous, though. She's a very attractive woman. She's very pretty. Which is, again, the sticky part. Because I don't think a lot of the most popular characters in media are good character designs. But that's usually because they don't need to be good character designs. They're iconic because of the media they're in. They're iconic because of the story that they have and the journey we go on with them. I don't think any of the designs in in Avatar or Last Airbender are very good, but they are perfect for the situation they're in. They're in an animation, they have to be simple. They have clear choreographed, clear demonstration of, alliances, personality types, slight variations in costume that matches their personal preferences. It works perfectly for that show, that IP, that thing. Are they great character designs? I don't really think so. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are bad in the sense that they don't fit or aren't helping with the IP that they're in. I think if you're looking at it from a pure character design standpoint, a lot of really iconic characters in the zeitgeist of our kind of pop culture are not good character designs. That doesn't make them bad characters. That doesn't even make their designs all that bad. It just means that there are other reasons for why that character is cool, either by the nature of their history, either by the nature of how important they are to people. All of these things are big influences on how a character design is perceived, how we judge the value of their character. And, in characters like Bayonetta, I think her design is pretty whatever. Her new one, at least. I'm sure there's a story reason for why she looks that way. I'm sure it's pretty cool. Doesn't really matter in the face of just judging her design itself, but judging her character, of course it's important. Of course that matters the most, is continuity from her character on a story standpoint. Do you still find time to play some games these days? I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV once in a while. Like, I'll play like 15 minutes at night or so. But otherwise, not a ton of other time. Hey, Mr. Riddle. Hello, how are you? How's my day been? It's been pretty okay. Just been working pretty much all day. And I'm still working right now, which is why I'm not sharing any art today, because everything I'm doing currently is pretty tightly protected. So you just have my voice today and, answering anyone's questions if they have any. Do you look up to the same artists you looked up to before when you were just starting out? Somewhat. Some of the artists, yes, some of them, no. Like when you're a kid, you're dazzled by different things. And when I was a kid, I kind of just liked any artist that was doing anything like anime, very cute, very basic. Didn't have to have good fundamentals, didn't have to, have a certain quality to it. I just liked any and all art. As I got older, I started having different tastes. I started cutting off a lot of Japanese traditional anime artists because I didn't really want to associate myself with anime at the time. So I started looking at a lot of older artists. a lot of more professional ones that actually had, like, I guess, clout in terms of industry kind of stuff, because I was starting to be more interested in, like, working professionally. And then fast forward a couple years, I'm kind of in a middle ground between the two, where I do still look at that kind of stuff. I look at classic painters, and I'm a lot more interested in fine art than I was before, but I also do look at a fair amount of, like, Japanese anime styled art. And it's kind of like a return to an old preference, but also new artists populating that preference, because I've got different tastes now. So to a certain extent, yes, I have maintained some of the artists that I've liked in the past, but to a certain extent, no. I do distinctly remember times where I'd be going through my DeviantArt and being like, why did I follow this person? Why did I follow this person? I don't even like their art. I don't think I even liked their art when I followed them, but I followed them just cause, or something like that. So definitely has been some change. Are there projects you've worked on that are no longer NDA that we can look up? Not particularly. These things kind of stay in NDA for a very long time, so I don't know if or when I could ever say what I've been working on, because sometimes these projects just die while in production, and I'm never able to share the work that I did. So sometimes you're just missing, like, a couple years of your life because the project that you were working on at the time just died. And I don't even know if I'll be able to recognize some of these projects once I'm done with them, because especially if you work freelance, you never really know how people are going to be marketing these things once they're out. So they could be under a different name, a different IP, ultimately it just depends on by chance or by luck that what you work on will really ever release. If at all. If you're a concept artist, nothing you work on will ever probably release ever, but do you think everyone can work with art? Sometimes I feel like I'll never get there. Yeah, study every day, but sometimes it's hard. Yes, on principle, I have to believe that anyone can get into art. Because I think, just the act of doing it, the fact that, like, you kind of just need to develop a self-awareness about what you're drawing, what you're working on, what you need to continue to learn in order to make it work. Like, I inherently believe that, yeah, anyone can get into art. Whether or not you last or stick with doing art will strongly depend on how much you want to be a part of this, how much you want to be working in this space. Because it will very easily wear you down if you don't really have the stamina that can kind of keep you together. It's not something that you can get into easily without any kind of extenuating hardship. And yeah, it is a very slow process to learn and to grow and achieve good results. I've been drawing for 20 years and I still don't feel like I am anywhere close to any kind of... I'm not at a point where I can yet feel proud of the work that I've done. I still don't like the work that I do, and I still have a lot more to work on personally that I feel like I have to... like, things that I have to make in order for me to say, like, okay, yeah, sure, maybe I'm kind of okay at this thing. So, yeah, art is something that anyone can get into, but whether or not you stick with it is kind of the bigger question. Do you work remotely? Yes. How do you keep yourself motivated? It's kind of hard. I mean, I've kind of been working from home most of my life because I used to do freelance, or I still do freelance. So, I'm pretty used to working from home, but it is definitely hard to keep yourself motivated when you're just like staring at a computer all day. I think you know, trying to find something to sort of change up your environment once in a while is a pretty good tactic. So there are times when I will go and take a walk for like 20 minutes and change like, you know, what I'm looking at, get up pretty often, go hug my cat, get a snack, kind of take a couple minutes every few hours to just sort of like chill and think about like, okay, what am I trying to do, what am I trying to work on. And some days it just kind of never happens, like you're just like perpetually distracted and perpetually just sort of you know, watching whatever YouTube video you put on versus working and being productive, and those days are just gonna happen. You're gonna just have to get used to it, and then work with, you know, like, oh, okay, if I didn't accomplish this much this day, how much more work I'm gonna have to make up for that, or how much work I'm gonna do to make up for that, you know, the next couple days. It's very much a fluid process. You kind of have to roll with the punches and figure out like what's a good routine for you. Some people really do well with having like a schedule that they stick to and having a variety of activities that they do every day. I'm very much not that kind of person, so for me it's just like playing it by ear and being like, okay, I'm feeling kind of like antsy, so I'm gonna try and go outside for a little bit, or maybe even work at the library today. Or finding new things to listen to or new things to watch. That kind of stuff. Do you charge a specific amount for contract work, or do companies generally have an amount they already know they'll pay? Some companies do, some companies don't. Generally, bigger companies will ask what your rate is. And smaller companies will say that, hey, we have this amount to pay you, let us know if this works for you. With companies, I generally give them either an hourly or daily rate, daily being 8 hours of work, depending on, you know, how big the company is and stuff like that. So it ultimately depends on who is contacting you at that point. I tend to do 8 heads. Because it's easy, you just go 4 from head to crotch, and crotch to foot is, or crotch to heel is just 4 heads, 4 heads. Ravana bird? Which one was... Ravana? Was that the bug man? Yeah. It took me so long to get the birds to drop, and then I did one run each for each of the Heavensward ones. I haven't gotten all of them, but it only took like one run because Cole had insane luck. And we'd do it once and it just dropped, and I'd be like, what the fuck? Cole, do you know how long this took me to run myself, and how you run this with me once and we got it first time? It was insane. Okay. Hold on. I will be right back so I can refill my water bottle. Okay. If you want any of the birds or dogs, we have to farm them before Endwalker. No! You mean I have to farm the dogs too? Before Endwalker? There's no chance. I'm never gonna get them. It's never gonna happen. I play on Ultros and Primal. How did you get started with contract work? How did you get noticed? I didn't really go through any like official means. I kind of did the long and slow route where I kind of had social media. I was posting on it quite a bit. I was doing commissions for people, like private ones. And then at some point, people were like, hey, are you looking for work? Do you want to do this thing contract-wise? And it was pretty hectic because I was like really young when I was starting to work on stuff, because like people thought I was 20 online, because they didn't expect a 16-year-old, 15-year-old to be doing stuff. So having to learn to negotiate contracts and stuff was kind of a nightmare. But honestly, like, if you're online for any period of time and you post relatively regularly, you have your portfolio available, people are just kind of always looking for creatives to work on stuff. They're kind of always just ready to like have projects that need artists, creative eyes, a freelancer for like a week or two. Some of them are rush jobs. There's always stuff like that. So I'd say having all of your kind of professional stuff sorted so you have things like a website, your rates that you're gonna probably ask people, how much you'd want to be charging, have kind of a good sense for how much work does, or how much time do you need to do X thing that you could be potentially hired for. Have examples of things that you'd want to be working on your social media, in your portfolio. And you can also advertise like, hey, available for work, that kind of thing. Honestly, when I was starting out relatively small. Again, like as I mentioned, doing like personal commissions for people, and working my way up to people that were commissioning me for commercial purposes, companies, and indie startups or whatever. You can build up to that stuff. It does take a while. I didn't get my first like kind of official job until I'd already kind of been freelancing for like 8 years. I'd already kind of been doing commissions and commercial work for like 8 years until I got the first thing that I was like, okay, this is kind of a big boy contract. And that's kind of why I always tell people, like, if you're gonna do contract stuff in the way that I did it, it might take a while because I wasn't super active about it. And I had that luxury because I was in high school. Not many people start social media when they're 12 or 11. But there are stuff like what is it, like Spectrum Art, a magazine, art books that people can submit their stuff to, joining charity zines. doing fan art, joining in bandwagons, getting in on communities like Warrior Painters, Resolution Art, Discord, stuff like that. All very good ways to kind of spread your name and also get more eyes on your stuff, because you never know who is in a position to refer you to someone else, or is in a position to say like, hey, we're looking for someone. Hey, I met this person at, you know, an event, and I wanna get in contact with them because I saw their stuff. So always keep your options open. Always be kind of looking for opportunities. Sometimes people will post like Twitter openings, and sometimes, you know, people will have applications open for stuff. There are occasionally like freelance contract positions on typical job posting sites, so you can also look at those. I don't really know how those go in terms of like consistency of when those are posted, when you can kind of I guess stay in the know about that kind of stuff. So you honestly have to look for yourself if there are any places you're looking for in particular. But yeah, those are kind of the ways that I know personally. Any good ink fine liner brushes for Photoshop? I'm dying to find one that looks realistic. I don't know. I'd say check out Gumroad and ArtStation store for brushes and see if there's any that you can find. There's a lot of different types of brushes. I just don't know what you're looking for in particular. Are contracts pretty accessible, or do you need to retain an attorney to understand them? You kind of just need to look out for some stuff. Like verify that, you know, information about how much they're paying you and stuff like that, if you've already communicated pay, which you always should, before signing a contract. Make sure like payment and stuff is all set in stone, you understand that. If it's an actual contract and not a freelance gig, which means that you're signing like a legitimate work contract with a company or so, you have to make sure, you have to check to see whether or not they have an exclusivity clause, which means that you can't work for other people unless you either tell them ahead of time and they approve it, or at all. You can't work for anyone out while you're working with them, which can be a pretty big just kind of it's kind of a big deal if freelance is kind of your bread and butter and that's how you make most of your income. And if you're not working all the time, you're not going to be able to, you know, pay your bills and stuff like that. That's when you should be very attentive to when you're signing exclusivity clauses, because they won't necessarily tell you. They're usually never going to tell you if you are. Some companies take it for granted, some companies don't do it. It's ultimately dependent on who and what is in the contract. Just check to make sure that, you know, everything doesn't look terribly complicated. They always recommend that you have a lawyer, and I would definitely recommend potentially, you know, asking someone who is more familiar with contracts to kind of look over the first couple that you get, especially if it's from companies that don't have a lot of like presence. And potentially, you know, if you do get a contract for like a bigger company or studio, then getting a lawyer is not a terrible idea, because the bigger the company, sometimes the more jargony their contracts, so you can't really suss it out yourself. But I've generally never had an issue. You should also see stuff about terminating a contract if it's like kind of just up to both parties if they can do it. Check about ownership of work. Sometimes they'll put in a clause saying, oh, artists can put stuff in their portfolio, or artists cannot for the duration of X thing. That'll also tell you, you know, how long the NDA lasts for. Stuff like that. Generally, they're okay. they're not the worst, but they can be pretty difficult to understand, especially if it's your first time reading them. Good morning. I hope you have had a good day so far. Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons for both, for sure. Miss Peach! How you doing, Miss Peach? Still sneezy? Sometimes when she is sneezy, she also looks extremely, like she cries a little bit. She's got tears in her eyes. It's always very sad. Peach, come on. Peach, give chat a hello. Can I make you squeak? Honey. Oh. Peach, can you give them a squeak? Oh. Okay. Oh, do you need food? Here, let me fill your bowl, Peach. For some reason you're so scared of the actual scoop, the food scoop, but then you come back. So I got like a huge container because Peach has this very special food that she needs to eat, and I got like a big bag of it because she just ran out, but I didn't know how big it was. I thought it was a similar size to the one that I had. It was like double the size. I think it was ultimately like a 16-ounce bag of food. Or was it pounds? No, it was pounds. It was pounds. It was a big bag. So I had to get her like a giant container for food. But for some reason, Peach is extremely afraid of the container that it's in, and she's afraid of the scoop that the food comes out of. So like, if I go to refill her bowl and she's standing next to the bowl, she runs and hides until I've put the scoop back and I've closed the lid of the box or whatever. And she's so weird about it. But as soon as it's done, she comes running back. She starts munching. So you might hear some little nibbles potentially. That's her. My question is, I've been learning anatomy. I'm kind of getting the understanding of muscles in the human anatomy, but I cannot remember the names of muscles. Is it okay if I don't know muscle names? If you know what the muscles do and where they are, it's okay if you don't know the names. I'd say it helps me personally to know names, and in the past, I've always found that knowing the names kind of really helps me cement my knowledge of the material. But ultimately, if you can do all that and do it without memorizing names, functionally you know the same kind of stuff. So if you don't need it, don't have to do it. I recommend it, but it's okay. I really like the way you draw stylized heads and faces. I've drawn with realistic proportions for a while, but it's difficult to transition into drawing stylized. Thank you. And I totally agree. It took me a very long time to really understand how stylization worked, and I am still kind of working through it, honestly, because it's hard, especially if you're particularly used to drawing in a certain style. Realism's hard to break. Semi-realism is hard to break. And honestly, it's kind of just about like pushing your comfort zone a little bit every time you draw. So for me, I'm like trying to push my like habits of exaggeration. I'll try to push it little by little so that you know, even if I'm not used to this level of like extreme exaggeration, I can like work my way up to it. That's been something I've been trying to work on a lot more often. Is just trying to like get a better sense for stylized proportions, stylized line work, and stylized line art, because I feel pretty stiff in a lot of the work I've been doing lately, and I'd like to fix that. So I totally feel you there. It's very difficult to do it if you are not used to stylizing at all. This painting is giving me heartburn. Hey, Creative Lad. What helped you with improving line work? Honestly, finding artists that I really liked when it came to line work. It's kind of hard to really come up with all that stuff on your own. It's hard to know what really constitutes good line work until you've kind of seen it in action, and then you can kind of say like, okay, what are the differences between their line work and mine? Is it that they just kind of are more confident? In that case, I just need to kind of I just need to continue my you know, studies and keep trying to become more familiar with the act of drawing, as opposed to, you know, like, oh, is it because they use heavier line weights in these specific areas and it gives it a lot more of a richer feel? Is it because they don't use any shadows at all? Is it because they have a very specific preference for thickening weights in certain areas? Why do they do that? Why not? Do they have a specific quality to it? Is their line art textured? Is it loose? Is it very clean? Do they have consistent line weights? Like all those things, all of these little tiny details can really help you if you are aiming to hit like a very specific look or feel. What do you think is essential on a character concept piece? Depends on what the character concept piece is for. If it's kind of like a mood piece, you don't really need to worry about making sure that every single detail in the clothes is there and ready, because concept art has a lot of different uses. One of them being key art, so that marketing people can be happy and show it to audiences and be like, look at how cool our game is gonna look. Or if that concept art is for actual modelers, totally different purpose. Then you need to start thinking about like, okay, so I need to make sure that the clothes are easily readable. The lighting, if I even have any, is not going to obstruct someone's ability to see how this form turns in space. In fact, lighting is exclusively used to help someone understand like overlap when things are casting shadows on stuff. That means like, okay, so this comes out to a certain extent. It adds dimension to a character that the 3D artist would need to be like, okay, so if I'm going to model this out, this is how I'd block it. If it's for, animators, if they're looking at, what is it, a pose sheet, they don't really need all of those nice colors and nice rendering. They really need a focus on clear, silhouettes, clear line of actions, clear poses that are dynamic enough to serve the purpose of whatever you guys are working on. So concept art has a lot of different ways that it can be good and ways that are essential to whatever part of the process it's trying to help. If you're just doing concept art for concept art's sake, it's kind of meaningless. Not to say that it's not worth doing, it's just like sometimes you have to just decide, like, are you making a nice piece for it to be nice? Like, are you making the cityscape just to say that you did a cityscape environment key art? Or are you making it so that an environment modeler could look at that piece and be like, okay, I can start blocking out these like buildings and set up this town and stuff, and know, like, maybe the level designer needs that kind of information so they know, like, okay, so here's where we plan out the route, and this is potentially what this side quest could take place in, and so lots of different ways for concept art to exist, and a lot of different reasons, a lot of different things that could be essential to that piece in particular. Hydrate. Luckily, I just refilled my water bottle. Hear the crunch of ice. Peach! She's pouting because I picked her up earlier. She's like, I don't want to talk to you. But she, like, sits right in front of the door, so I see her tail. She doesn't go very far. She's like, I don't want to talk to you. But I also don't want to be too far away from the door, so I can come in at any time. I see you, Peach. I see what you're doing. And I do respect it. Any tips for creating your own art style? So I don't necessarily think art styles are things that you can create or should create. I think there are, things that you can do to guide it to a specific direction if you think that is what is more creatively fulfilling for you. But emphasis on creating an art style is kind of, I think, the wrong way to look at it. Regardless, if you're interested in a very specific style and you want to kind of work in that direction, my recommendation is to do some research. Look at artists that you think emulate that style well. Figure out what parts of their style is, like, why does it work? Why are you interested in it? Why do you think it looks good? What purpose do you want to emulate it for? Kind of pick apart the pieces of the artist that you like to see, okay, what is it that they're doing here that I really am interested in? And take those big hallmark pieces of that style and try to fumble with, okay, so what am I doing differently? Why am I not drawing in a way that's similar to this? What do I struggle to do? What am I failing to do? What am I not thinking about so that it doesn't have the same quality as X artist or X style? And then, once you kind of have those figured out, you can then move forward with saying, like, okay, so what do I need to do or learn to do in order to go from point A to point B? Yes, Peach, I know you'd wander back in. So you draw proportions in a very specific way, but you kind of want to transition into something that has a different feel or a different look to it. Okay, so what does that take? Do you need to take another look at anatomy and figure out, okay, so what am I not communicating well enough in my anatomy? What do I need to relearn? What is it that I need to start understanding, like, choices that they make, things that they omit, drawing, things that they add into their characters or whatever that can add to whatever style you're trying to achieve. For me, I've always saw that kind of back and forth comparison as the kind of most like broken down step-by-step way that I could I guess like concretely see the differences between what I'm doing and what artists that I respect are doing. And in that way, it helps me understand and break down, okay, so if I were to shoot for something of this nature, what is it that I am missing from my toolbox, from my skill set, that I need to accomplish this and make this feel natural? And those are usually the things that I'm looking at or looking out for. So that would kind of be my recommendation. Even though I think people have put a lot of strange and kind of nonsensical values on style, I think collectively we've all kind of made it feel like something you have to have in order to be a legitimate artist. That being recognizable as X artist is something that you should be working towards, and if you don't have that, you're not, like, legitimate or something. I don't know. It's very strange. Because I felt that way too until I realized how stupid it was. As for tips on starting out with freelance artwork, like finding clients, getting your stuff out there, doing. Kind of answered this question before. In terms of finding clients, I'm not really someone who like went out and hustled for it, so there are probably better people to ask about that specific process in general. A lot of my work came from me just being available online, having my artwork kind of like up and I had like a website, I had a resume, I had my rates all figured out. I was, actively posting on my social media so that, my account was out getting put out there and stuff. And I would always be trying to make work that is in line with what I'd want to be hired for. Or at least that's what I would hope other people do. Because there are always recruiters kind of secretly looking for artists, secretly putting people on lists for future use and future contacts. And, you can join Discords where they have like job search channels where they'll post, like, if someone on Twitter is like, hey, looking for X person to fulfill this thing in like 2 weeks to a month to 6 months, you can always go for those. Sometimes freelance contract positions open up on job hunting sites like Indeed, potentially LinkedIn sometimes will have that, other places, like other job hunting sites. That's kind of like my general go-to in terms of putting myself out there. I wasn't very active because I usually typically worked on stuff that lasted longer than a couple of weeks, so by the time that I was done working on one project, I usually had at least one other kind of floated into my mailbox at some point. Only recently did it suddenly start being a case where I had to like say no to people because I was starting to get too many, and I think a lot of that is predominantly just because of the art that I posted on my social media, of stuff that I've done online that people have found. Either team members passing my stuff off to recruiters or recruiters themselves kind of looking through social media to find artists. That's kind of typically how it's done, at least in my experience. But that doesn't mean you should just not try. I just think there are better artists who could give you better advice on that specific thing. Vicky, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Any tips on dealing with wrist elbow strain when drawing? I've been grinding, but I notice I might be overdoing it. So, there's the classic stretches that you should do. With your wrist, put your, what is it, kind of like flat of your palm on your fingers, and like hold your arm out and press down so that you're stretching kind of that forearm group, wrist side. Do the same turnaround, put your hand straight out, palm down, do the same thing so you're stretching the other side. Relax your fingers, massage around kind of like the tender parts. When it comes to elbow stuff, it's usually because your elbow's always bent, and that can kind of pinch a nerve. So when you're sleeping, if you're doing anything, if you're leaning on one side, try to always have your elbows straight out so that you're never like kind of compressing it for too long, especially if you're sitting drawing all the time. Shake it out every couple hours. And massage the muscles around your elbow. Just by the act of gripping a pencil, you're activating a muscle consistently. And if you're doing that hours in a day, that muscle will get sore and potentially cramp. So, just feel around, feel what feels like kind of tender, a little sore, and just like massage it before you go to bed. When you're sleeping, try to not sleep on or like put your head on your elbow or your wrist. Try to keep them straight, don't bend them too much. Wear a wrist brace if you feel particularly like your wrist is feeling particularly weak. Wrist braces are very good and some pretty cheap. I think at this point you can get them from like your drugstore, convenience store, or just online. I sometimes sleep with those if I feel like my wrist is particularly sore one week. And just kind of like shaking it out more often than not. A lot of that strain usually just comes from like when we're really focused and we're not really thinking about it. That's when it is usually the most dangerous. I was thinking of doing more cat breeds for the paw emoji, but I just don't have enough like emote slots to do that. So maybe in the future, at some point, if I ever unlock more tiers for emotes, then I will do other colored paws, other Pete's. Is being an artist easy? No. I'd say it's very enjoyable. When it's good, when things are going well. But is it easy? I don't know about that. Hardest part about being an artist. The kind of perpetual state of self-loathing. I feel like very rarely do you meet artists that are kind of not like consistently bothered by the fact that they do art for a living. You're always inevitably going to come across some instance of like emotional turmoil at the expense because at your expense because you're doing something creative, and creative stuff is kind of difficult to like judge yourself by. That part sucks for sure. Favorite anime? What would be my favorite anime? I'd say Full Metal Alchemist. I'm kind of totally blanking. I haven't watched anime in a really long time. Full Metal Alchemist. Are we just talking TV shows? Because if we're just talking TV shows, then the list is kind of small. Hunter x Hunter. I really like Hunter x Hunter. I remember really liking Aria. It's like an old, very like slice of life type anime. What else? What else did I like? Yu Yu Hakusho. Neon Genesis Evangelion. Although I kind of like Neon Genesis, kind of just. I don't know if I really liked it because of the anime. I think I just liked it because it's Neon Genesis. And It's like my favorite mech designs of all time. Oh, if we're talking about character designs, good character designs, Neon Genesis has got the mecha design portion of that completely locked. I don't think I'll ever like another mech design nearly as much as I like the Evas. Does that count as a character? I don't know. I think so. Have you had time to watch the movies yet? I think the last time I asked you, you hadn't. I don't know if I'll ever watch the movies. Honestly, like, I'm happy with whatever version of Neon Genesis I have in my head. I don't really need to watch the movies. I'm okay. I like Evangelion, but not really. I don't know how to explain. Like, I don't really like it for the fact that it's like a show or an IP. Or no, I don't like the fact that it's like a show. I think I just like the IP, and I like how it looks, what it does, what it's about, but I don't necessarily care about new iterations of it. I don't necessarily care about, like, keeping up to date with all the newest pieces about it. Have I seen Erased? Yes, I have. Is it worth watching? I'd say yes, just to note that what all the hubbub about it is about. It's like Akira. I watched Akira and recently, and I was like, I get why this was super big when it came out, but watching Akira now, after people have hyped it up for, like, at this point, decades, it's like an alright film. It's bizarre, for sure, and I think I would really want to read the manga that it's from, because I think just from kind of watching it, it's not that much of like its own masterpiece in its own. It's like a piece of art for sure. Story-wise, as a movie, to me, it's not very much of a masterpiece, but I think it's because I didn't kind of grow up with it in the time where it was, like, the, I don't know, it was, like, the thing that altered people's perception of anime. Not to say it's bad or anything. I just think there are sometimes things where you kind of just have to watch it to appreciate that it existed, but you don't really need to, like, I guess, like it to be a fan of it, you know? Like, I'm a fan of Akira. I'm not really huge into the movie. I thought it was fine. It was weird, but it was fine. But I like it enough to, at some point, I do want to read the original story, I guess. Do people watch mech anime for the story or the mech fights? If anyone tells you that they watch mecha anime for the story or the characters, they are suspicious as hell. No, I'm joking. I only watch mecha anime for the mech fights. I think the mechs are the coolest part. I don't really care if there's a cute anime girl in the cast. I don't really care if there's a really generic anime boy in the cast. I don't really care what the humans are doing. All I care about are the mechs. I want to see the mechs. I want to see the mechs blow up. I want to see the mechs fight each other. I want to see them take out huge galactic-sized swords and hit each other with it. Like, love mechs. I'm watching it for the mechs. Mecha anime sorely are missing mechs in their shows and stuff, and it hurts me deep down to my core. I mean, it's like people who like kaiju movies. You don't really go watch kaiju movies for the human subplot. You watch it because there's a kaiju in it. That's the cool part about the kaiju movie. But people probably aren't really gonna go watch a film if it only has the kaiju in it. Even if they hate the human part, they're gonna struggle to go through an entire film that only has a kaiju that can't speak a human language, that doesn't emote like a human does, doesn't have any of those like stupid bare plot points that gets them through like most of the runtime, just so that they can get to the 10 minutes of Godzilla fighting another giant kaiju. Like, that's kind of that's it. I'd say with Evangelion, for me, yeah, I do like the pilots a little bit more than I do in any other mecha anime. I still primarily watched Eva specifically for the mechs. Every time they were on screen, I was so excited that I didn't care if Shinji said something stupid, or Asuka was making me tear my hair out, or if any of them had a weird romantic subplot that they kept trying to plug back into the main plot. I didn't care, because I was like, yes, love it. Unit 01, kicking ass with a dagger. That's cool. That's great. Super down for it. And then, you know, some weird psychological thing would happen on screen, and I would just kind of zone out and disassociate until the next mech fight happened. But maybe that's just who I was at, like, 10. I have kind of watched SS Gridman. We started it, as in my partner and I. We haven't finished it though, and I do kind of want to finish it because it was pretty promising. But yeah, we haven't finished SSS Gridman. Yes, I. It baffles me whenever people are like, yeah, I didn't watch the mecha anime for the mechs. Like, then go watch any other anime with a cute basic chick and a guy having a weird romantic subplot for the entire thing. Give me mech fights. That's what I'm here for. But no. I guess we needed to have weird psychological tension between these two teenagers in the middle of a fight. That's kind of where I stand. That's pretty cool. I did try Code Geass. I really did. I couldn't. I don't remember why I stopped. All I could think about was just like, I couldn't take the melodrama. It was like a very specific brand of drama that I don't know if I just like was ill-equipped to handle emotionally at the time. But I just remember like every one of my friends being super into Code Geass, and then I tried to give it a shot, and then like within a couple chapters I was like, I must stop. That doesn't mean that the designs are bad. I actually frankly don't know what they look like, because I kind of just steered clear of Code Geass after that. But yeah, I just remember like the characters, things were happening, and I was like, okay. Code Geass? Geass? See, I used to... How did I used to say Evangelion? I used to say Evangelion. Or... something like that. Neon Genesis Evangelion. Instead of Evangelion. So I probably am saying it wrong. Absolutely. But I've always heard it pronounced as Code Geass. Or Code Gate. I don't know. I should not be the person to decide that at all. The Kite movies? Kite? I don't think so. It looks interesting though. I like the style. Okay, let's see what I can do about this. Thanks for coming, Ruby. Hope you have a good time wherever you gotta go, and feel free to drop by anytime I'm streaming in the future. It's nice having you. What was I trying to look up? It's, I don't know, everyone's kind of had an experience with it, so it's a very easy thing, I think, in these parts to have like a pretty riveting conversation about your tastes, I guess. It's good too. I like when people can engage in a conversation and it's not just me speaking, because there's a limit to how much I have that's interesting. Any tips on painting details when I zoom in the painting falls apart? So when you're painting details, it's good to kind of, before you do that, to take like a good overall view on like what you're really looking at in your piece. Like, what is your focal point? What are the places that you want the viewer to look at, and where do you want, the most emphasis or the most contrast? And really plan out ahead of time where you're gonna start rendering stuff, because details are like a huge rabbit hole that you can get into that will just take over so much time and then give you nothing in return. It is dangerous to get super caught up in them. It is incredibly easy to get caught up in them, and ultimately, you'll find yourself like 15 hours deep into a painting and you don't know where it's going anymore. So taking a good stock of what you're trying to accomplish first and foremost, and then kind of focusing all of your rendering stuff in those areas and slowly branching them out. always be zooming in and out to really check to see how your rendering is kind of affecting the overall look of the piece. If it helps, you can kind of do things in layers, so you're never truly like making a permanent decision on the piece. You always have kind of some room to backtrack and say like, okay, so that choice I made actually didn't work out very well, and now I kind of want to take a step back and maybe go back a couple steps and redo that. All of which is perfectly fine. It's really hard to strike a balance between, you know, what is like good detail and what is kind of deterring your work from getting that like last bit of you know, polish. Best way to kind of do that, at least in my experience, has always just been to be cognizant of all of the things you're putting into a painting. Because I don't know, you kind of just never really know when it's too much until you have the experience of saying like, okay, I'm starting to get a gut feeling that maybe I should kind of slow down and take a overall look at what I've been doing. You kind of just have to play it by ear. Thoughts on Eureka 7's story and design? I thought Eureka 7 had a really good art style and a really good kind of costume sense. I never really watched it though. I tried the first episode and I never kept watching, so I don't actually know about the story. When I went to art school, did I have time for a job, or is it as bad as people say about not having time? Ultimately depends on the makeup of your class schedule and your time management. I was working jobs while I was in school, predominantly freelance, and like it sucked some semesters when I had particularly busy ones. Like if I was having a 20 credit semester, it sucked. And when I had like a 12 or a 14 credit semester or a 15 credit semester, like it was okay. So depends on the classes you're in, depends on your workload, depends on how good your time management is, and depends on what kind of jobs you're working at. Or working on, rather. Did I have any gap years? Yes. I took a gap year between high school and the first college I went to. And I didn't do anything on it, but I still felt it was very helpful. Is there a particular skill you'd like to work on in the near future? I would like to get better at painting. I'd like to specifically get better at like doing bigger illustrations with like backgrounds and stuff. I feel like I don't really ever do that, and I don't know. I feel like if I just practiced it more often, maybe I'd get more used to it, and I'd feel more comfortable with painting backgrounds and things like that. But God, I hate backgrounds. Hate environments. Okay. I'll probably end this at 10 since kind of tired. I'm probably still gonna be working, but I'll give my voice a rest at 10. But that will only be like, what, that'll be like 20-ish minutes. Do I have any other main hobbies besides drawing? I kind of don't, and that's not a great thing. I really should have more. I've debated like what kind of hobbies would I want to have kind of like in my free time. It was funny. I actually had a chat with a couple of my coworkers the other day, and like both of them had so many other things that they were doing, and like they were strangely in line with like a lot of hobbies. Like they picked up a lot of craft based hobbies, so like sewing, costume making, knitting, crocheting, stuff like that. And I was sitting there just like, God, I don't have any hobbies. I don't like really have anything that I do personally outside of art. I should really do something, right? But I haven't really figured out what that is. It'd be nice if it was something that could keep me healthy, but yeah. I don't know. I never really had like the mentality of having a hobby. I pretty much just always drew when I was younger, so trying to figure out like what I'd want to do outside of drawing is kind of a weird concept that I haven't really considered. But I really should, because it'd be healthy and good for me to have something else that I do. I did try learning ukulele, and picking up like what is it? Like bullet journaling, writing. I've done kind of like I pick up random personal projects once in a while, but it always comes back down to art. So it's like, does it really count? I'm not sure. Reading might be a hobby. I don't read a ton, but when I do have a book, I finish it in like a day. So it's kind of difficult to like maintain that because I can't go to the library all the time. Like the last time I got a book, I was so excited that I had a book to read that I finished it the same day, and I was like, damn, now I don't know what to do. This was supposed to last me like a week at least. But yeah. How long have you been working on this particular piece for work? It's been a bit. It's been longer than a week, for sure. But that's kind of more my fault, because I should have had this done beforehand. It's okay though. I've also got some other things that I have to do for this assignment, so I've got a lot of stuff to do today. Do I 3D model? I don't, but I would like to. A project I'd really love to do is, modeling my own figures. I would love to get into modeling and then 3D printing stuff. I think that would be really fun. But I kind of just don't really have the stamina to 3D model anymore. Like, I used to, when I had a class specifically for 3D modeling, or like specifically 3D sculpting rather. It was really fun, and I was like, damn, I could pick this up as like a second thing that I do for like an actual hobby. And then I tried doing it the other, like last year or something. I tried picking it up again, and like just trying to get through that original hump of like, oh wow, this takes so much longer than drawing. I was like, okay, this is definitely something I have to dedicate myself to relearning again, because this is a huge thing. So much respect to my coworkers who 3D model, because that's their job. I'm like, it took me an hour to make something super ugly, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna require some work for sure. I do want to learn like Blender though. I really want to learn, what is it, like grease pencil or whatever? I think that'd be really cool. like actually sculpting. I'm like so not like I've tried in the past to pick up like actual 3D sculpting with real clay. It is definitely a struggle for someone like me. I would like to get into it though. It's kind of one on my list of things I'd like to pick up when I'm retired, kind of stuff. When I like have time to really think about like art in other contexts, because it seems like such a cool way to work. But yeah, that's a skill I'd definitely need like a whole lifetime to work on. Any tips for coloring with a theme? When I color on, they always seem off, but I guess. So ways that you can kind of, what you're looking for, I think, is kind of like color correction, or kind of post-processing. It's hard to know how to color things automatically with like a theme in mind or a color palette in mind. So a way to do that is to either study, you know, other artists and how they kind of have chosen their colors with a theme, and oil painters are great for this because they had to do it without any kind of like post-processing stuff, although they have tricks. But you know, there are ways to do color correction digitally, like putting like a color filter on stuff, using an overlay layer, a multiply layer. Photoshop has a lot of adjustment layers that are great for this purpose, and I love using them, and they've saved me on multiple occasions, because you can kind of just flip through them and see like what kind of feel or atmosphere you want, and then you can change it via like a gradient map, a color lookup. You know, there's a ton of different ways to do it. I don't know what program you're using. It might be harder or easier depending on what it is, but I strongly recommend, you know, looking up tutorials on how other people finish their paintings through, like, what kind of gradients do they use, or what kind of filters do they use, and kind of just work through it. Most people I know use filters, even if it's just like on after they finish painting, they drop an overlay layer on it and they just airbrush like a certain color, and it unifies all of those different tones that they had all together. And it's like that last bit of like polish that you need to make something look really good. That's kind of what color correction is for. Unless you are really, I guess, like color minded, you could potentially do all that without needing any sort of like post-processing stuff, but vast majority of people don't necessarily train that way anymore. So definitely a good way to learn, and at some point you'll eventually start being able to do it without any help. What's your daily routine for a normal day? I wake up just in time for my first meeting. Which is terrible. You shouldn't do that, but I do. And then I work until, typically you're only supposed to work until like end of day, but I always end up working until like 7 or 8. And then if I have freelance stuff, I'll do work from like, if I have freelance stuff, then I'll work on that, but usually around like 10 or 11, that's when I like formally stop working for the day, and I'll like play a game for I don't know, from like 11 to like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and I'll go to bed and I'll do the whole thing over again. So it's not like the most healthy routine for sure, but yeah, I work a lot most days. Some days are less intense than others, and I'll actually get to like get off work around like 6 or something, and I'll, you know, eat dinner and chill and watch a YouTube video or something. I don't know. What's your favorite genre of games? What's your favorite game? Genre of games? I tend to find myself really interested in kind of like single player RPG type games, often ones that might be puzzle oriented or like action adventure, but not so like a ton of action. I'm not very good with any games that are like you gotta shoot people. Like I don't typically play those games. Favorite games, um, Nier Automata, Journey, Spider-Man, PS4, and Miles Morales. Um, Persona 5. I was really enjoying Judgment, which is by the Yakuza guys. What else have I played? That's all I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, Link's Awakening, Breath of the Wild. I wasn't even thinking about Switch games. Breath of the Wild. I liked Pokemon Sun and Moon, kind of just because it was the only Pokemon I was really around for. The other Pokemon games kind of came out when I wasn't really paying attention to Pokemon. But I do remember enjoying Black 2 and Pearl. And these are all like kind of games that like I more or less either finished or got close to finishing. I'm not really even talking about games that like I liked and played, but I didn't necessarily like. They're either like hanging in the balance, haven't really finished them or anything. Those games are, they're definitely some up there in terms of like games that I like Horizon Zero Dawn, Yakuza 8, I think, because I haven't started the other ones, but I'm sure I'd like the other ones. Death's Door, Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, Awakening, tons of other games that I haven't really finished, haven't gotten to them in a while, but, they're there. Of course, Chrissy, thank you for coming. Have I tried Disco Elysium? I haven't. I've heard pretty good things about it, so I might give it a shot at some point. I have not tried the demo, no. That was the one I was playing, because Gary was trying to get me to play Yakuza games, so we did play Like a Dragon, which I did really enjoy. We just haven't really finished it. Oh, yeah? I will definitely have to check it out. I haven't really been paying attention to a ton of games recently. Funnily enough, you don't play as many games when you start working in them. Yeah, of course. What kind of games have you been keeping your eye on? I don't honestly like keep an eye out on games. I'd say if you're really asking me, the only game I'm really technically looking out for is Breath of the Wild 2 and what was it? I just thought of it. Spider-Man 2. Those are the only two games that I'm like really excited for, that I don't want to know anything about. Because they're kind of the only two games that I like really played on my own and like really invested time into, and I'm very excited for them to come out, and I want to experience them like I did the first time. Have I played Mirror's Edge? No. But I kind of always wanted to. I've heard so much about it when I was like younger that I was always like, it'd be great to play Mirror's Edge. And then by the time I grew up enough to buy consoles of my own, I kind of just like didn't really have the interest anymore. It's a cult classic for sure. But I guess I just wasn't really into it by that point. Oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't then. I get pretty bad motion sickness from games in general. I get motion sick playing Minecraft. It's been challenging for me to stylize expression, but your character expressions are great, and the stylization is also on point. What do you think while in stylization? Honestly, it's kind of a little bit of like muscle memory and experience. Like, I know there are certain expressions that work really well for a given context, and I'm used to kind of the hallmarks of a face that would match it. So honestly, something that might help you is to, look at an expression, whether or not that's how other artists draw it or like the actual expression itself, and take a look at what makes that expression recognizable. What are the hallmarks that make it, that particular emotion? And then try to figure out, okay, so how do I apply those same hallmarks? Like, is it the eyebrow? Is it how far can I push these features around to make them work to what I'm trying to accomplish? And then then trying to compare and contrast, like, okay, if I draw this expression, what does it end up looking like? Why do I do that? What are my habits that I tend to make? And why are my expressions not feeling as impactful or potentially as, like, they don't look nearly as impactful, they don't look nearly as, maybe emotional, if that's something that you're looking for. Maybe it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like you're pushing it far enough. It doesn't feel natural. It feels kind of stiff. All of those things are honestly things you have to kind of work out on your own. It's hard to figure out what that should be, the answers to those questions. But starting off, a good place to sort of get yourself going is by really just breaking down the core elements of what makes an expression recognizable, what makes it powerful, and then going from there to rework and redefine their expressions that you draw. Because it could very well be that what you're struggling with is just kind of a lack of kind of just experience with drawing an expression. It could be that you're lacking the stylization that you enjoy, and that kind of requires you to study artists that, you know, emulate that for you. All I can really say is that expressions are something that you kind of have to work on for a long time. All your life, essentially. Because they're such an integral part to drawing a character that it's hard to really be drawing a character with expressions and personality and stuff like that, and not have that be a really big deciding factor for how successful your character design is. So for as long as you're drawing characters and human figures, you're probably always going to be reworking and rehashing, you know, whatever you know, whatever habits you have when it comes to drawing expressions and stuff like that. Any drawing tablets you would recommend for a beginner? There are a ton of cheaper brands out there nowadays that you can look into. I'm a pretty, like, I don't know, I've always used Wacom tablets, and they're expensive for sure, which is why I don't necessarily recommend people buy them if they haven't really dedicated themselves to drawing and they don't want to make that investment. But I've always used Wacom tablets, but other people have used stuff like Huon and XP Pen and seem to have pretty equal experiences with them. So, you know, ultimately it's kind of up to you and your budget. You can get an iPad if that's a lot more economical for you, but hardly are iPads often economical for people. And plus, they're like, Apple Pencils like get worn down pretty fast, so I don't really know. Favorite medium for traditional art? Pencil, pen and pencil, really. Okay. I think it's 10, so I think that'll be it for me, so I can kind of chill on my Friday. But yeah. Hopefully by next week I'll be slightly less busy so we can actually go back to doing like commissions and stuff. But otherwise, thank you guys for coming, even though it was kind of a weird new format that I haven't really done. I appreciate all of you guys coming out and asking me questions so that I can fill this time. Thank you. Well, I was playing my own stream. That was really strange. Yeah, so hopefully by next week I will be a little bit more available for stuff. Drawing, answering questions, all that stuff, so we can keep up streaming every Friday. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for dropping by. I really appreciate it. Let me see if we can find someone to raid. Oh, I guess Niku is streaming. Let's see if there's anyone else that I can stream on this night. But yeah, thank you guys always for asking questions and like filling up this time. I really appreciate that you guys care enough about my opinion to ask. Um, very much appreciate it. Okay, let's see who we can raid. I want to raid someone who doesn't have a ton of viewers. Oh, I didn't know if I wanted to do it just because I didn't know if people were going to be filling that request like the whole stream, and I didn't know like who would be streaming at what time, like if by the time I actually get to raiding people most of those people are offline. So it kind of just got easier just to find people as I was doing it. But yeah, okay, well let's raid Niku since he's a friend of mine and draws pretty cool stuff. So let me go to creator dashboard and set all this stuff up for you guys. We could set that up for sure. I'll let you know. But yeah, thank you everyone. I love you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. Stay safe. And I will see you guys next week.